This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe, episode 217. My name is Matteo, the executive producer of the show, and this is a very well-known format for us. We call it Ecosystem Zoom In. And we zoom in to Poland together with Piotr and Dariusz. Piotr and Dariusz, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Matteo.
So let's start with the usual couple of minutes of introduction. Let's start with Piotr. Piotr, you guys founded FinTech Poland. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Okay, so FinTech Poland Foundation was established in 2016. It was for very few years think tank dedicated to financial innovations. So we published reports and create a background for fintech landscape to grow in Poland. But a few years ago, we decided to transform into association. So we established a legal framework for cooperation with entities from fintech landscape in Poland. Right now, we cooperate closely with over 90 entities, and we focus on different formats, beginning from networking meetings like event meetups. We run working groups dedicated to regulatory aspects and presenting those topics to regulator and supervision financial authority bodies in Poland. We also cooperate with other associations from Europe, especially, but not only, also with ASEAN market and North America.
Great. What's your background, Piotr, before a previous...
So I'm a lawyer. I work...
No, but it's okay. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. So I work for banking sector for over 12 years before creating FinTech Poland Foundation and focusing on this topic solely.
Thank you. Dariusz, welcome as well.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Your background a little bit.
So I'm the CEO of BLIK Polish Payment digital solution available in all mobile banking applications in Poland for nearly 30 million customers using mobile banking applications and more than 16 millions of active individual users on monthly basis right now. So I've been in the CEO position of the company for the last 7 years. I started my adventure with BLIK exactly 10 years ago in the role of vice president responsible for business development and marketing and product development. It was very first day of the commercial launch of the solution in Poland. Before the role in BLIK, I was responsible for another development of another fintech. I was CEO of a fintech called SkyCash in Poland, dealing with mobile payments. One of the early, let's say, pioneers of mobile payments in Poland, starting already 2008. It was a completely different era in the mobile payments, let's say, landscape than it is today. But I've been dealing with this segment for quite a long time already.
Super interesting. Actually, we had never had the pleasure to meet before, but I was working for Swift for a long period of time. And then the innovation arm of Swift called InnoTribe was like the first tenant of Level 39 in London, right? That was sort of the cradle of one of the first and probably, the largest back then sort of fintech ecosystems. And I've been dealing with sort of in the space for the past 15 years. Been to Poland a couple of times. There is Wolf Summit. But so far, Poland to me looked like the best kept secret in fintech because the tech scene was pretty lively, right? So it is interesting to know how even the fintech arm, or this fintech association was. First sort of a consulting arm and then transform itself into more of an ecosystem play. Why is that? Because technology is there, resources is there. It is a sort of affordable tech-wise. So there are a lot of companies that are putting their tech center in Poland. Why is it, in your opinion, that? Is that maybe a cultural thing? Is that you guys are more doers than marketers, and it is all content and a little facade? Because Poland has not yet been at the forefront of the large ecosystems such as the Benelux one or the French one or the Spanish one. So talk to me a little bit about the evolution of the ecosystem. Dariusz, you mentioned it was a very different era when you started. How it evolved?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question because if you take a look at Poland, probably you should bear in mind one thing, that Poland is a country quite well known for two things in the ecosystem, let's say, environment, which are extremely important to mention. The first one is that this is a very entrepreneurial country. Small and medium companies in different segments, tech, traditional retail, and so on, I would say is very and has always been vibrant since early 2000 or even, let's say, since 90s. So there was a great, let's say, modernization of the whole economy in Poland since the beginning of 90s. And the growth over the last 30 years in Poland was, I would say, undisturbed. It was really all the time on permanent basis. And first of all, thanks to very, very, very entrepreneurial approach of, let's say, of the average Polish citizen. So this is one thing. But another thing, almost very important to mention as well, is that Poland is quite well known for let's say, very advanced IT resources and IT, let's say, technologies and universities and so on. This is probably one of the most advanced countries in terms of the education of IT. And we have a lot of, let's say, entrepreneurs graduating directly from technical universities with business spirit, trying, instead of going to corporate career, and instead of following a traditional way of doing, let's say, pursuing the professional career, people are simply aspiring to make a startup, to come up with something new. Of course, it's also very important to mention that let's say, being backed by private equity and venture capital, let's say, environment is extremely important to support this area, which is evolving all the time in Poland. And I think that fintech is not an exception, because we might say that there are also quite interesting martech, medtech, and traditional IT companies as well at the same time. But of course, we are focusing here on fintech, and when we do think that the, let's say, environment of the fintech companies is really becoming interesting. And right now we are going to another stage of coming with our products outside Poland, if we're trying to expand, then rather than to scale only the product on the Polish market.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning that we've got a very modern and innovative banking sector that did a huge step forward in early 90s with a very innovative approach with digital banking solutions, mobile banking solutions that fulfilled the gap that was covered in other countries by fintechs. So banks in Poland are also defined, especially part of the banks are defined of fintechs. When you think about the projects that they run, they are very innovative. Sometimes they are the very first to implement a new solution on the market. So the relatively space for growth of fintech was limited. We've got also very modern landscape for payment providers that also covers the area of everyday needs for citizens. BLIK is probably the best example, but in Poland we've got presence of other companies like PayU or others aggregators that also covers the needs for e-commerce solutions. So the fintechs needed additional time to find a space on the market and to grow enough to be competitive and also to scale up to be able to promote themselves and also think about going abroad. The most of fintechs in Poland, over 80% of fintechs in Poland, still receive the REVE mostly in Poland. So the numbers of fintechs that are interested in going abroad for the last period of 5 years was limited relatively. So that might be the reason why the landscape, fintech landscape, Polish fintech landscape, is not as known as Luxembourg, which is dedicated to going abroad. And in Poland, we just focused mostly on our internal market. The best example, BLIK, that covers in e-commerce solutions over 90% of transactions for peer-to-peer transactions, for example, in Poland. So this is the example of the company that it's ready to expand abroad. So we are waiting for others to join.
Interesting, and actually, of course, I almost forgot that how vibrant is the tech scene and the coder scene and the entrepreneurship scene was pretty clear to me last year. I went to Gdańsk, to speak at InfoShare. You probably, of course, you guys were there because everyone was there. And it is true that. When in an ecosystem, banks are considered as the first innovators, fintechs have a little bit and harder time to sort of get in because they're not considered as innovative. But I don't know what you think. That's the question. Longer term, they probably have a better chance to scale because they already have that reminds me like a FICO in Germany, or for example, the same sort of schemes that we have here in Portugal, where you don't need, the payment scheme is already organized for the whole country, so as if when a startup comes, they come with the value added on top because there is no need, for no need. It's not only for innovation, but that part is already taken care of, from the incumbents, between brackets. So, do you think that for a startup that how is the relationship between the bank and the startup? Because when an ecosystem is already very well developed, if banks are smart, they should collaborate faster, right? Especially because now there is, the evolution of the fintech ecosystem is not anymore a question. It is a fact. We all know where this is going, right? So I suppose that, as well organized as a bank might be, they're still, not good in doing micro lending, for example, or SME lending, or even peer-to-peer lending. So that's one typical example where, the need for innovation is sort of obvious. Is that the case also in your ecosystem, Piotr?
So it's changing. It's a process of that approach of banks in Poland changed for the last period of time. So at the beginning, it was like banks was as innovative as they believed in their internal resources to create innovation. So for a very few years of starting the new movement of fintechs in Poland, the banks implement innovation by themselves, using their internal resources. But the approach has changed. So many topics are right now ongoing. New technology is coming. For example, artificial intelligence in parallel to blockchain and innovation in credits. So to cover all those topics in parallel, they learned that it's more efficient to work together with fintechs. So as we noticed that after launching an ecosystem in Poland and providing a platform for further cooperation for market participants, this kind of cooperation became real. And we just needed additional time to learn how efficient the cooperation might be, but also banks in Poland are truly secured, not only because of the approach of our financial authority in Poland, which is very strict when you compare to other countries. It's not so supportive for fintechs. It's a rather conservative approach, but it's also caused that the level of expectations for fintechs was very high. So the fintech landscape need to grow to become mature enough to cooperate effectively with banks in Poland. And this is what we see nowadays.
Dariusz, anything to add?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the innovation coming from the banking sector in Poland, which we believe is quite specific because at the very early stage, it was very, very visible. For example, when the new regulations from PSD2 were, let's say, implemented all around Europe, we saw that banks could be much more dynamic, it's much more agile in implementing, in coming with new products. I would say, especially in the payments, area, than independent fintechs from the market. And it was, I would say that at the very early stage of adopting PSD2, there was a very strong defensive strategy from the side of banks that they just simply didn't want to be disrupted. Maybe sometimes they exaggerated with this, but they just simply didn't want to be disrupted with innovative solutions coming from outside the banking sector. And to be honest, they were quite successful in this part of the business. So banks preferred to do themselves rather than, let's say, outsource to independent fintechs. Of course, a lot of exceptions from this thing. One of them is, for example, BLIK, because we are an example of a fintech being outside the banks, but created by banks. So there was absolutely a conclusion that in order to be agile, quick, responsive to the market, this kind of idea cannot stay in the structures of traditional banks or be dealt between banks, but it must be a completely independent company that would be moving fast in the market.
Is it a for-profit company, BLIK, Dariusz?
Definitely, we are on one side a company for profit, normal commercial company. On the other side, very profitable company. and we do think that we do think that building scale in the payments, let's say, industry, it's absolutely important to have an association of banks, because banks still have a lot of power, and we have really profited from this power in the Polish market. But I also wanted to tell you that we do think that in the last 2-3 years, it's changing a little bit. I think that banks are, I would say, more trustful vis-a-vis fintechs, because they are really coming with completely new technologies that it's becoming more and more difficult for banks to, to grab those type of competences. And I absolutely agree with Piotr that coming with AI, for example, for banks, they really need to go to different fintechs, and not only fintechs, but really structures outside the banks, because these type of competences are evolving so quickly on a daily basis that this is really incredible, difficult to maintain those up-to-date competences in all banks. And of course, very important thing, and Piotr mentioned this, there is a very significant regulatory burden that is put on let's say, on the backs of banks. And there are a lot of regulatory, we would call it regulatory projects, in order to be compliant. Another project must be let's say, must be done by banks. And this is really competing against, let's say, commercial and business projects in banks. So there is always a challenge: do we invest in a regulatory project, which is extremely important, or we can, leave some space for the normal business? And I think that in the last 2-3 years, on one side, there is more and more fintech cooperation with banks. On the other hand, the burden of regulatory project is growing, and probably this is one of the reasons why banks are searching for reliable partners outside banks, because compliance is consuming more and more time.
Actually, I was wondering, Dariusz, when you were talking, BLIK being seated at the center of the Polish payment rails, I wonder whether or not you have put in place a collaboration framework for startups to come, because if a startup comes to you and manages to implement a successful solution, whether it is in credit scoring or whatever, typically anything related to payments, you are the engine able to bring that startup everywhere in the country. So I wonder what's your relationship and your framework to work with entrepreneurs in the country is.
Very, 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 very good question. Thanks for asking this, Matteo, because on one side, probably there is no other organization in Poland, maybe it's not very modest, but I would say there is no other organization or startup or fintech in Poland that would appreciate cooperation and collaboration as we do. Because, we have in our DNA cooperation with competing banks against each other, creating a standard together. So it was really one of the unique examples of a very specific, let's say, partnering platform that was elaborated in Poland early 2013, because at that time there was already an idea to cooperate on payments and not to compete on payments. So this cooperative, let's say, environment is extremely important. And what we have achieved over the last 10 years, we have achieved, in my opinion, to transfer this cooperative approach from the banking side, we would say, to the fintech side, to payment institutions, to different electronic money issuers and other small payment institutions. All type of fintechs dealing with payments are very much welcome to join us. We are joining even very, very small startups, helping them. So we have become quite, I would say, quite interesting gateway for partnering with banks through BLIK. And we do think that this approach is this is in our DNA, but we also observed in other organizations coming from the banking infrastructure, which would be potentially a clearinghouse, that would be also a credit bureau, for example. All of these organizations are step-by-step opening themselves for partnering with fintechs. And this is coming with additional value-added, let's say, services that they can provide to banks as well, because this is for us a great network great partnering. This is a great new way of providing new business cases, for example. And on the other hand, there is a great advantage for banks to have them and in a centralized way that we are doing through BLIK. So you're absolutely right. We are profiting from collaboration of banks, but we are also a center of collaboration for fintechs and payments in Poland. Yeah.
I would add also that the position of BLIK is also has an additional layer, that BLIK is a strategic partner for association that creates a platform for cooperation, for further knowledge exchange. So the role of companies in Poland like BLIK or the leading banks are involving into the supporters of growth of the whole landscape. So that's very important role from our perspective.
Piotr, I had a question on capital. Because you mentioned actually Dariusz as well, that the role of venture capitalists is super important, and I wonder whether or not today the fuel for Polish startups comes mainly from the Polish VCs or scale up entrepreneurs or the diaspora, of scale up entrepreneurs coming back and investing, or if you think that today Poland is enough under the radar of the European and global VCs in the fintech space particularly.
So our survey provides the data that still over 55% of fintechs are supported from the financial point of view of individual entrepreneurs in Poland. So we are becoming a market that appears on the radars of venture capitals and abroad. But still the numbers of foreign investments in Polish fintech landscape is responsible for 25% of fintechs. So still we are at the stage that we are looking for opportunities to cooperate. The fintechs are in growth enough to market themselves abroad, because before they were focused on providing services in Poland. That was the basic goal, to provide a service and launch the service on the market. And after they grow in Poland, now the next phase came to search for investment abroad.
Interesting. I also have another question. What's is there a main fintech event in a country, or is more like a fintech stream in an existing one, like the InfoShares or the Wolf Summit that I mentioned before?
So there's no one leading event. We organize a summary of the whole year of running an ecosystem and cooperation, that it's at the end of the year to summarize the achievement and the steps that we did. So it's called Future Finance Summit. But there are many conferences among the whole country. It's not only limited to capital, to Warsaw. So we've got events in Gdańsk, in Poznań, in Krakow. So and it also reflects to the landscape. So 50% of fintechs are focused in Warsaw, in capital, but the rest are spread among the other cities in Poland.
Interesting, Dariusz. When you were mentioning the story of BLIK and the infrastructure and the way you collaborate with the local ecosystem, I had one question and also one invitation. Actually, the question is. It is very clear how you connect inwards, right? But what are your relationship with the other BLIKs, of Europe? I mean, there is one here. It's called Multibanco in Portugal. I wonder whether or not there is a space for you guys to talk and exchange. And also, and that's valid for you, Piotr, we together with Elevandi, we organize something called Point Zero Forum in Zurich, which is a European event for around the regulation and payment systems and policies around the fintech innovation. I think it would be super interesting, and I will follow up separately with both of you, but especially for Dariusz to come and tell the BLIK story. So I'm doing a public note during the podcast to make sure I follow up. So apologies, but do answer the question, please, Dariusz.
Okay, I will answer the question, but first of all, I accept your invitation. So
great, thank you.
Don't mind. Thanks a lot. So we'll manage all the details afterwards, but this is another fantastic question from your side, because I would say we think that Europe is a perfect space for the development of digital payments right now. What is happening is really exceptional, and I would say is even unique right now. But because what we observe is that there is space in a few countries in Europe, not all of them, but in some of European countries, in which local banking solutions have developed successfully locally. So definitely I would mention Multibanco with SIPs as a great example. But we cannot forget about Bizum in Spain as well, growing quite nicely, provided by Spanish banks. We cannot forget about the Nordics friends. We know how successful they were with adopting with the digital cashless solutions in different countries, from Denmark, Sweden, Norway. They are very quite advanced in the scope of digital payments over there. We know that there were quite interesting attempts from Italian banks to come up with Bancomat Pay, for example, in the way. So potentially there is a new approach from their side to accelerate growth in Italy as well. And of course, we know how much Germany and France is involved with Benelux countries are involved in the what we call European Payment Initiative as well in the digital payment area. So we see that there is a lot of initiatives, already very successful, being a kind of digital national champions, or solutions that are really, that are really planning to launch their activity, which is, for example, EPI in Europe, with involvement of 30 biggest European banking groups, for example, at the same time. We think that on one side, there is an extremely important part of cooperation between different solutions. And one of them, and we do believe that this is one of the priorities for Europe, is really to think about instant payments between schemes and between solutions. And we do appreciate all initiatives that are, targeting what we call in our, payment slang, targeting interoperability between payment schemes and solutions, digital ones. But on the other hand, we are also participating in a kind of exchange of experience organization. This is why we were very active since the very beginning, what is so-called European Mobile Payment System Association, EMSA. This is something that is really up and running and really working on standards of interoperability between schemes, doing really good and concrete job at the same. But on the other hand, it's also important to mention that there is a important part of Europe that has not come up with really successful local solutions. And this is why we as BLIK, we see a lot of, we see a lot of chances and great potential for growth to those countries. One of them, just to tell you, is, for example, our neighbor Slovakia operating in the Eurozone, unlike Poland, unfortunately for us, yet. But we have acquired, we have invested, we have acquired a local fintech. It was called Viamo, dealing with P2P payments. We are upgrading this platform with our BLIK technology right now. We want to come up with our products to Slovak banks and afterwards not only Slovak banks, but all banks operating in the Eurozone. So it means that in the future, I believe that in the coming 2-3 years, we'll see a fantastic new type of competition in Europe between digital, either competition or partnership. We'll see new type of doing payments, digital payments in Europe, competing for the same customers, European banks, coming with the up-to-date payments technologies that we are capable of bringing, because we have proved that Spain is working in a very nice way, Poland is working in a very nice way, Portugal with Multibanco is working in a very nice way. Why can't we try to conquer other countries coming with our products? Because local citizens still are not able of using those types of digital payment solutions. So there is a great potential for growth for all of us. And we do believe that this race has already started. We are participating in this race. We are doing Slovakia. We are also investing very, intensively in Romania to come up with BLIK products to Romanian banks. We do think that in the coming 2-3 years, as I told you, we'll see fantastic new type of competition between digital payments platform in Europe.
It's very, very well said. First and second, it really shows that opportunities are there to grab, right? Because there are indeed the different speeds in the European ecosystems, and technology is certainly not the issue. The issue is really for the ones who are able to find probably the right partnership, right? Because you cannot just colonize a new country, payment-wise. You need to find an effective and smart and capillary, local partner to help this solution get into.
Absolutely, and if I may, Matteo, it's also very important for us, and we discussed with Piotr a lot of times, that for our industry, payments industry, and I think FinTech has total, we are very much open for colleagues and payments and FinTech professionals from all over Europe coming to Warsaw, not only Warsaw as Piotr exchange, because we do believe that the exchange of experience is also, coming to Warsaw to work with us and to building FinTechs in our country, cooperating with us. So Poland is very much open for, European partnerships and coming here, working with us. We are inviting more and more friends and colleagues from outside our country. We've got French people, we've got Italians, we've got Croatians coming to BLIK right now. We must become more and more, multicultural in order to be successful in implementing our solutions outside Poland. So this is what we are doing right now.
Thank you, guys. Our time is up. Thank you very much for shedding some light into a fascinating ecosystem. I hope to come back soon, and certainly I will follow up in getting you involved into our initiatives. Piotr, Dariusz, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Matteo.
Thank you,
Renato.
Pleasure.
And guys, that's Breaking Banks Europe. It's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.